start with the basics.
Mhm.
We hear it all the time, this saying that you are what you eat. What does it really mean? And why is healthy food so important to our health?
Yes. So people do like to use that saying, we are what we eat. Interesting because we actually aren't what we eat. Some people tend to moralize food. We tend to think like we're equating if we're eating good, then we're being good, which we kind of want to move away from. But we do know that even though food is neutral and all foods have some sort of benefit, whether it's physically, mentally, or emotionally, we do know that eating a diet full of nutrient-dense foods, which just means that it has a lot of vitamins and minerals and the things our body needs to run optimally, is what's most important.
That's a great answer.
Thank you.
Well, talking about what we eat, the
Mhm.
American Heart Association says that the Mediterranean style and DASH eating plans support good cardiovascular health.
Mhm.
Can you explain these diets and why they're beneficial?
Yes. So the DASH diet, and DASH stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. And that was created specifically to help people lower their risk of getting high blood pressure. So that focuses a lot on getting more fruits and vegetables in your diet, staying away from higher sodium items. The Mediterranean diet is similar to the DASH diet, but it doesn't focus on blood pressure. It just focuses on trying to it kind of mimics how people eat in Mediterranean countries. So there is a large focus, again, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, legumes. The two diets are similar, but one is specifically, the DASH diet is specifically to help people lower their blood pressure. But both of them are full of good things.
Great information. So it's really an emphasis on like fresh, whole foods. Speaking of that, let's talk a little bit about a plant-based diet. How
Yeah.
does that support health?
So the DASH diet, the Mediterranean diet, and plant-based, they're kind of very similar. It's focusing less on eating animal products, more on plant-based. So when people hear plant-based, a lot of people assume that it is a vegan diet where there's no animal products, or a vegetarian diet where the animal products are limited to things like eggs or cheese. But most people can have a plant-based diet where it's more just focused on trying to get more plants in their diet. So maybe having meat is fine, having animal products is fine, but it's more of switching it up where the vegetables are the main dish and maybe the meat can be the side dish, as opposed to how most Americans usually eat, with a big piece of meat and then like some veggies on the side.
That's a great visual, Maren. And it's also good to know that a plant-based diet can be a little more flexible.
Definitely.
Now, is there a such thing as eating for your heart and brain? Or in other words, what foods boost heart and brain health?
Yes, so there are some foods or food groups that can benefit both your heart and your brain. Again, I feel like a broken record, but including things that have fiber. So again, your fruits, your veggies, beans, legumes, oats, like whole grains like oats. Those things, everything with fiber can help. It actually helps lower cholesterol. It helps pull cholesterol out of your body. So we want to focus on trying to get more fiber in our diet, which most Americans don't meet the fiber recommendations. Another thing that can be beneficial is focusing on getting more saturated fat in the diet versus saturated. So saturated fat is usually found in animal products. It can also be found in things like coconut oil, while the unsaturated fats are usually found in like plant-based. For example, instead of having a piece of red meat with your dinner, you can substitute it out for like a salmon dish that has a large amount of omega-3 unsaturated fats, which is good for both your heart health and your brain health. Research has shown that. Another thing that people can do is, instead of using coconut oil when they cook, they can substitute in heart-healthy olive oil, which has some good omega-3s as well, and some omega-6 unsaturated fatty acids, which is beneficial for heart health.
Well, thanks for breaking that down for us. I know a lot of people are afraid of all things fats.
Yes.
So it's great to know where to emphasize that, the unsaturated are really, helpful to your diet. Thanks for
Yes.
breaking that down.
Mm-hmm.
Here's one that I think our audience is really going to perk up around because a lot of people have this experience. When you're building healthy eating habits, that starts really early in life. And I know a lot of parents struggle with getting their kids to eat healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you talk a little about how parents can teach their kids about nutrition and making healthy food choices?
Yes, and this is a great question. The number one thing we have to realize is the idea of nutrition and health is a very abstract idea. And it's really hard for kids to kind of grasp that idea. And sometimes it's even hard for adults to grasp the idea. So we really want to focus on moving away from making concrete statements like this food is good and this food is bad, because most kids may not understand that and they might not get the complexities of something like that. So I would say the number one thing that parents can do is just model a healthy relationship with food to their children. We want to include all foods into the diet and to have the parents see it's okay, to have veggies, with your meal, and that veggies taste delicious. And it's also okay to have a cookie or a treat, just as long as it's kind of treated the same, that they're equal and that they're neutral. Another thing parents can do is to include children in all aspects of preparing and cooking meals. So even starting at the grocery store, if you're bringing your kids along, have them pick out a piece of fruit or vegetable that they might be interested in and have them, pick it out and put it in the cart. And then when you're preparing at home, give them a task. Have them clean the vegetables or chop it if it's age appropriate to use a knife. And that gets them kind of more interested in eating it because they helped prepare it.
Great point. I love your advice about having kids involved in making healthy food choices, and then also setting that example, as a parent to make your own healthy choices that can influence your kids. That's great. Well, having this influence is really important. Today's kids consume 10 times the recommended amount of sugary drinks. This is super concerning because the amount of excessive consumption of sugary drinks is really taking a toll on our health and on the healthcare system. Can you talk about what excessive sugar does in our bodies?
Yeah, and this is again another very complex idea where we want to look at health as a multifactorial issue. It's not just what we eat and how we move. There are so many different factors that involve how a person can achieve optimal health for themselves. And some things can be controlled and some things can't, like where you live and your genetics, if you have a family history. In regards to sugary drinks, yes, people do overconsume them. It's very easy to overconsume them. So if that's one thing you're looking at where you're trying to limit the amount of sugar in your diet, if you're drinking a lot of sodas, one thing to do is to focus on maybe choosing the lower sugar or no sugar options, or even the diet options. You can also, if you like the carbonation, the bubbles, there are a lot of carbonated flavored waters that can substitute for that. Another thing is sweetened tea. If people like sweetened tea, don't buy the tea that's already sweetened, just get an unsweetened tea and then put your own amount of sugar in it, because usually that's probably going to be less than what they're putting in the tea itself.
Wow, those are some really great examples of easy sugar swaps and ways to really kind of control your intake, the overall amount of sugar consumption. Mm-hmm. Thanks for those great examples. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about sodium. And we know that too much sodium in our diets over time, it hurts our health and it increases our risk for blood pressure, heart failure, stroke, and other types of chronic illnesses. In fact, according to the American Heart Association, 9 out of 10 Americans eat too much sodium.
Mhm.
So, can you talk about where all this sodium is coming from and what are some ways that we can cut back?
Yeah, so a lot of the sodium that's found in our diet is usually from prepackaged foods or foods in restaurants. When you're at the restaurant, not only do they most likely use prepackaged things like mixes, but they're also then adding tons of salt with it when they're cooking. I do understand there are some people who do rely on prepackaged foods. They're a very budget conscious choice. It's easy to buy some frozen meals and heat them up. So I do understand that there are some people, a lot of families who rely on these things. So if you are buying prepackaged meals, you do always want to look at the labels, see if you can find lower sodium options, and then also see if you can mix in some fresh foods as well to those prepackaged meals so that you're maybe bulking up the meal and eating less of the actual portion, and you're focusing more on trying to get more fresh produce into the meals.
I love that as an example, a little bit of portion control and a little bit of ways to sneak in even more healthy, fresh produce.
Exactly. Again, we don't want to demonize items. Some people do rely on this. So we just want to make sure that they understand it's about reading labels and seeing how they can add more nutrition to their meals.
Well, there's something else we hear a lot about, and that's mindful eating and how it can help you to eat healthier and with more appreciation and intention. Can you walk us through the practice of mindful eating?
Yeah, so mindful eating is just the idea of being more present when you're eating meals, especially now that people have their phones, maybe they have a laptop on the table. They're not really paying attention when they're eating, and then all of a sudden they look down and boom, the food's gone, and I don't even know if they've even tasted anything. Um, so really it's about turning off the TV, putting your phones away, and being more present in what you're eating. And then also invoking all of the senses with the food. So how does the food smell? How does it look? What are the different textures in the meal? If you're having a salad, you can have like a crunchiness of like some sliced nuts. What does that feel like? What does that taste like? So with that, you're concentrating more on the satisfaction of your meal, and you then can get a little bit more idea of listening to your body and saying that this is satisfying me. I'm pretty full. I'm going to stop. This was really delicious. Instead of, again, looking down and realizing I just ate this whole thing. I don't even know if it was good. So yeah, that's kind of the idea behind mindful eating.
Wow, that sounds really appealing because, the whole concept of the cues, like sometimes we go through the motions and we miss the cues of our body and
Mhm.
the actual enjoyment and pleasure and taste of food.
Exactly. Yes, that's the best thing about food is the actual enjoyment of it. So, but sometimes we're just too quick and we just get through it and move on with our day.
Absolutely. Well, what would you say are some good places to start if we want to make changes toward more healthy eating habits?
I think the number one thing that I tell my patients and that I tell almost everybody else in my life is we want to see where we can add more nutrition. We want to see where we can add more fruits and vegetables, where we can add more whole grains, where we can add more fiber instead of focusing on, I can't eat this anymore, or I shouldn't be eating this. We can focus on how can I get an extra serving of veggies even not even this day, it could just be this week if you're just starting out slowly. And fruits and veggies, again, they've got vitamins, minerals, they've got antioxidants that's good for the health, it supports your health, fiber. So those are the number one thing I tell people. You can't go wrong with adding more fruits and veggies.
Wow, such good, easy tips. Thank you for that. Well, and our last question, let's focus on something that I know has been indicative of challenges that we all face. It's been a very difficult past year for a lot of people. Many people have lost their jobs and are struggling to make ends meet. What tips do you have for families who want to eat healthy, but they're on a very tight budget?
I think that the number one thing, again, focusing on trying to get more fruits and veggies, is don't overlook frozen produce and canned produce. A lot of people don't think that the frozen canned has as much nutrition as fresh produce, and that's just not true. There's plenty of nutrition that can be found in those items. And plus they're shelf stable. So you can buy it at a cheaper price and keep them longer than fresh produce, which you'll have to use at a certain time before they go bad and you might have to throw them out. Another thing I would suggest is trying to buy more plant-based proteins. So that's beans, chickpeas, legumes, even things like soy, tofu. I know a lot of people aren't big on the tofu, but it's delicious. It just tastes like whatever you put it in. And so that, number one, it adds more fiber, it's a good source of protein. And again, it's more shelf stable than a meat product. It has less saturated fat in there, or actually no saturated fat in those products. And then if you're not sure if you want to go like a plant-based route, you can do things to maximize your meat intake. So mixing hamburger meat, half mushrooms, maybe. You can't taste the mushrooms, but then you're able to have the meat last a little bit longer.
Maren, thank you. Those are such great tips and really kind of easy to do, easy to implement.
Yes.
Well, again, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate all the information that you've shared.
Thank you for having me again. This was a pleasure. I appreciate it.